Welcome to Blended Scotch Reviews by Stab the Dragon Productions for Blended Scotch Reviews. This is number 1. Tonight we'll be examining Dewars White Label. The only thing you get in a hurry is trouble, said Tommy Dewar. Apparently he was known for these Dewarisms, short pithy sayings. In reviewing blended Scotch, I know that I'm addressing those of you who are just beginning their Scotch journey or who've dabbled in it here and there but want to learn a bit more. I tend to be a whiskey nerd and I like to dive deep in the subject. I'm also pretty much a newbie when it comes to Scotch. So for this review, let's start with just the facts. This blended Scotch has been around since 1899. Has won a bunch of awards and comes in at 40 ABV. It's got a 750 milliliter bottle for about $21 here in Fort Worth. This is July of 2024 and it's presently about 98 degrees. It's about, in this blend, it's got about 40 different whiskeys going into this. And there's no age statement in the bottle, but by law, it's got to be a 3-year-old to be a Scotch. My score for Dewars White is an 84. My letter grade is an A. My recommendation. As an admitted Scotch newbie, I absolutely enjoyed this blended Scotch, and I highly recommend it. It has great value for its price and is always available. It's ubiquitous in bars and restaurants. And if you search the internet for most sold scotches in America, you're going to get a lot of variation over the last several years. But generally speaking, this is going to be in the top 10 most sold scotches. It's going to have tasting notes of honey, pears, citrus fruit, malt, and a touch of peat smoke in a very delicious combination. When this bottle is empty, will I purchase another one? Probably so. So let's get into the details now. That's the summary. Let's talk about history. When I evaluate a whiskey, I'm looking for 100 points total, and so history gets 5 points. Founded in 1846 in Perth, Scotland by John Dewar, 1805 to 1880, he was a grocer merchant selling wines and spirits. His sons, John Alexander, born 1856, died 1929, and Tommy, 1864 to 1930, helped him grow his business in his latter days. So if you did the math, realizing that all these dates came from the Dewars website, you see that Alexander was born when John was 51, and Tommy was born when John was 59. Good for him. Probably a second wife, much younger than himself. John Alexander Dewar became the brains of the company. And again, quoting from the website, in 1880, John Dewar handed the business over to his sons. But again, let's do the math. John Dewar lived 1805 to 1880, so when he handed the business over, he died. There you go. And in 1890, the two sons brought A.J. Cameron on board as a master blender. In 1891, at the invitation of Andrew Carnegie in America, Tommy Dewar sent a cask of their whiskey to President Benjamin Harrison in Washington, D.C. And President Harrison was the grandson of President William Henry Harrison, the hero of the Battle of Tippecanoe. So when he sent this scotch over to the president, it caused a controversy because American distillers objected to foreign whiskey being in the White House. These days we have other foreigners in the White House. Tommy Dewar went on a round-the-globe journey where he established a sales force in several countries, including America. And while in New York in 1892, it said that he created the highball cocktail with his whiskey. And the highball cocktail is simply whiskey, ice, and soda water, such as Topo Chico. In 1893, Queen Victoria gave Dewars a royal warrant, the first blended Scotch whiskey to be so rewarded. However, there's royal warrants for like Irish whiskeys that predate that. So, you know, royal warrant. And here on the bottle, I mean, it talks about royal warrant, but it cites Queen Elizabeth II. So apparently it was renewed by Queen Elizabeth II. So the current master blender is Stephanie McLeod. She's been there at the company since 1998. So that's actually a fairly rich history that I like. So let's go 5 out of 5 points. The bottle, label, and marketing, also worth 5 points. The symbol for Dewars brand is this Celtic truth knot. I'm going to hold this up there and you can look at that. And the truth knot is made from 3 Ds for John Dewar, Alexander Dewar, and Tommy Dewar. So, you know, that's a little bit of embossing on the bottle, so that's always a classy touch. The label has a stamp in red ink that says number AU-0126. Right there. And apparently, you know, that is for the number ensures traceability against forgery or imitation. Well, that's interesting. They claim on the bottle to have won over 1,000 prizes in competitions. It's the most awarded whiskey in the world, so they say. You see similar stamps, like this royal stamp, like I said, on Jameson. Let's get a good look at that. The light's glaring off of that, but that's the royal stamp of approval there. I consulted Jackson's whiskey, this big book here, and McLean's whiskey Whiskeypedia here, and they both mentioned that Dewars was the #1 Scotch sold in America. However, further research shows that was not the case anytime recently, so they didn't put a year on that. But all of the information I've been able to gather online says repeatedly, going back for several years, that Johnnie Walker Black is the #1 selling whiskey, or sometimes it's just listed as Johnnie Walker. I've only found a couple of sites that broke it down. You know, red was the second favorite whiskey, and Johnnie Walker was the most favorite of the Johnnie Walker blends. And then Cuddy Sark lays claim to being #1 a long time ago. Let me adjust this camera. There we go. So, you know, when you go to finding out which whiskey is #1, good luck with that. Some of the lists that I've seen have Dewars as low as 14, some #9 or #6. A couple said #2. But again, you're going to get a variety of numbers. So, but nonetheless, if you look at bars and restaurants, I see Johnnie Walker, I see J&B, I see Dewars. So, you know, those are the 3 blended scotches that I see. But I don't get out of the house much. So, all right, so bottle, label, and marketing. This whiskey is pretty much everywhere. The bottle's attractive, the label's attractive. So 5 out of 5 points there. Appearance of the whiskey. In the bottle, this is a pale yellow, maybe straw-colored, light gold, something like that. In the glass itself, it looks even paler. There you go. If you compare this 3-year-old Scotch with a 1-year-old Texas whiskey, This is Tawakero here, Tawakero Rye, one of my absolute favorites. That's a 1-year-old whiskey in Texas, right? Versus a 3-year-old Scotch. So that's what Texas climate does to the appearance of a whiskey. And I tend to prefer the darker whiskeys. And Texas whiskeys are all natural. There's no color added. In Scotland, you can add some color. So I may have to change how I rate Scotches just a little bit. Scotch laws, again, allow for coloring, so you just don't know. American whiskeys do not. I mean, bourbon, you can't color either. So when blending, just like trying to avoid flavor drift, the blenders try for uniformity of color between batches, and over time, coloring, can change, and so that's a real problem for the blenders. So for appearance, on a 0 to 5 scale, I'm giving it 3 points. Composition, 0 to 15 points. This is a blended Scotch whiskey. It's on the label, which means there is a blend of malt whiskeys from several distilleries and grain whiskeys from several distilleries. And so malt whiskey is based off of barley alone, while grain whiskeys include corn, wheat, rye, etc., like our bourbons do. And I've even heard that in Scotland they may use, millet or something like that. Triticale is even popular here in Texas in whiskeys, and the Scots are the ones who invented triticale. It's a hybrid between rye and wheat. So to be called a Scotch, it must be distilled, blended, aged, and bottled in Scotland. And the white label here was first produced in 1899 at their Aberfeldy distillery and is called, again, the most awarded whiskey on the label. It says gold and prize, 500 medals. Maybe it was the website that said 1,000 prizes, but one of those gold medals was awarded in 1904 at the World's Fair in St. Louis. And so I just happened to know that this musical movie starring Judy Garland, Meet Me in St. Louis, is about that World's Fair. So if you want a cheap date, have a bottle of Dewars and watch Meet Me in St. Louis. And old movies can be good. The Dewars owns at least 5 distilleries. Aberfeldy is their home base. Altmore, Craiglachie, Macduff, and Royal Brackla. They're currently owned by parent company Bacardi. So what goes into Dewars White? Well, I'm sure those 5 distilleries I mentioned. Aberfeldy is for sure, that's the home base for Dewars. And so I'm sure it's got Aberfeldy in there, but some sites have said it's upwards of 40 different distilleries, 40 different whiskeys have contributed to this glass. Michael Jackson's book there says on page 43, at their best, blended whiskeys are rather like an orchestra, a coming together of individual players to create a harmonious whole. Malts play different roles in a blend, with some acting as unsung heroes but holding the structure of the blend in place. Some will strongly influence the flavor, but none will dominate. And this is actually one reason why I love the blends so much. While some will say, and I can understand it, that the basic blends are simple whiskeys, not as complicated as malts, I would differ. When you study how these things are made, that's a lot of whiskeys going into a blend. And each whiskey, you have to fight flavor drift. Some distilleries go out and quit producing, so you have to change your whiskeys. Your palate changes with time, so what you taste today might be a little different from what you tasted 10 years ago. One whiskey site that I visit on YouTube is Whiskey Whistle by Mark Kaufman. When he reviewed Dewars White about 8 years ago, he also had a small bottle that came from an older version of Dewars, and he compared the two. He not only detected a very noticeable difference, he actually preferred the older version. But on the bottle, it says this: Dewars never varies. I watched a video of a distillery for a blend, and they had a research library of scores of bottles that they could use to help them prevent flavor drift. Old timers like Ralphie at Ralphie.com, who's been doing taste testing here for quite a while, one of the original whiskey YouTubers, will complain about whiskey flavor drift. I've seen him taste 2 different bottles of Johnny Walker Red and complain that the newer bottle has nothing on the older bottle. And he went on a good rant about that, and he's right. So blending is an art form as well as a science. It's very complex. When a distillery that contributes to your whiskey shuts down and you can't get that whiskey, what do you do with your blend? Dewars is known for the concept of marrying the individual whiskeys into their blend and then aging the blend again. And on the bottle it says it's double aged for smoothness. Right here. Double aged for smoothness. I don't know if you can read that or not. So in other words, each individual whiskey is distilled and aged, and then they pick their whiskeys, they blend it together, and then they age that again. Now, does Dewars list all the contributing whiskeys and proportions here? No. So as far as I know, only Compass Box does that. So under composition, the point total is 11 out of 15 due to a lot of missing information. But as complex as the information is, I get the point. So now let's get to the actual nosing of the whiskey for 10 points. It's pleasant, faint, some sweetness there, honey and pears, lemon or citrus. So I have a terrible nose, and the fact that I can actually smell the Scotch. I usually can't smell bourbons unless they're Texas bourbons. But this has a good nose, a little bit faint, but 8 points out of 10. Now it's time to taste this on the palate. A little bit of citrus, pears and apples. Honey is probably the strongest flavor there. I think the palate matches the nose closely. It's very pleasant. Just a hint of maltiness and a side of very slight smoke, particularly on the finish. Yeah, I'm getting a little bit of peat smoke on the finish. I think this, for me at least, this is an excellent introductory whiskey to Scotch. I can see sipping this for a relaxing evening. It's delicate, not robust. This is not going to be like an American bourbon or rye or any Texas whiskey. But this is definitely what I'm looking for in a Scotch. So different from what I'm used to. Creates an entirely different mood and experience. So for my palate, again, I'm a newbie, but I really like that. So I'm going to say 21 points on the palate. Mouthfeel, burn, finish, up to 15 points here. There is more of a mouthfeel than the reviews I watched have led me to believe. A lot of the reviewers say this is very thin. I don't find it watery like, say, Jim Beam. Jim Beam is watery. It's a little bit oily because I still feel it on my tongue. There's still a little tingle going on. There are some flavors still going on there. So I'm pretty pleased with the mouthfeel, and the finish is long lasting. It has a better burn and tingle at 80 proof than I would have thought. I would even describe it as a little bit spicy with a long finish. I do get a little bit of the peat smoke on the finish, just a hint of ash, once in a while a little medicinal, which I don't find unattractive at all. overall, it's very pleasing. And again, for an 80 proof, no age statement, I am pleasantly surprised here. So 11 out of 15 points. Now, neat or mixer. In my research, I've seen that this is a well whiskey for a lot of bars and restaurants. So if you order a cocktail with scotch and you do not specify what scotch to use, you're going to get the cheapest scotch they've got, the well whiskey. And frequently that's going to be Dewars, sometimes Johnny Walker Red or J&B. I definitely enjoy this neat. Yesterday I made a highball, and that's a very simple cocktail. You simply put ice in your glass, you put your whiskey in there, a couple of ounces of whiskey, and you fill it up with a soda water like Topo Chico. And you can put a lemon twist or orange peel, or in my case, I have limes, and so I cut a lime in half and put it in there. And I was shocked at how good that was. I normally never put ice in my whiskeys because to me it dilutes the bourbons or the ryes too quickly. This, I was surprised, had good flavor for the next hour in that highball. I was frankly shocked. So I've never done that before, and it's a hot summer day here in Fort Worth, so that was a winner. So I'm going to say this is good neat or mixer, but obviously if you look at all the reviews, if you look at the website, they're pushing this as a mixer. But my approach is it good neat? That's my starting point. And then if it's good neat, I'll try it as a mixer. And this held up, so 5 points. Price, value, and availability. Total Wine had it for $21.99. Specs $21.02. Goody Goody $21.99. This whiskey is so widely available, you could call it ubiquitous. Its value, though, is a subjective relationship between taste, price, and availability. So I would give this a high value, as I consider it to be a tasty, quality scotch for a great price, always available. 10 points for price, value, and availability. Bonus, I have 5 points left over to give as a bonus. And again, it's another totally subjective thing, based on lots of things like the story or the history behind the whiskey, the taste, bottle, and label. I really like the story of this whiskey. I like the bottle. Taste is really good. It's what I'm looking for. It's held up good in the cocktail. So Dewars gets 5 bonus points. That gives me the total score of 84. My letter grade is an A, and that's based primarily on taste and finish. And so, there's so many different factors when I evaluate a whiskey. But the letter grade is my final evaluation that says, yeah, I like drinking this. Absolutely. All right, we're going to take a break and come right back with a secret whiskey reveal and a cocktail. Okay, we're back. And the secret whiskey reveal is I've got Aberfeldy 12. This is probably one of the primary single malts that goes into the making of Dewars White. And so I'm going to do a taste comparison. The Aberfeldy looks to be just a little bit darker in the glass, and in the bottles I think you can clearly see how much darker that is. So that's a 12-year-old. Okay, there's the Dewars White label. And here's the Aberfeldy 12. Yes, I can taste some similarities. Definitely the Aberfeldy 12 is richer, creamier. It's got some different flavors, but also some similar flavors. So that's very good. A little bit of maple. Wow. There's some maple coming in there from the Aberfeldy. And in this glass, yesterday I made a highball using Topo Chico and a slice of lime. This is a little bit different in that I'm using Sprite, 0-calorie Sprite, sugar-free. So I'm going to see if the Dewars White holds up with a soft drink. And I'm going to say that that's fine. I think the Sprite kind of obscures the. I'm going to pour the rest of this in there. I didn't put quite as much of the whiskey in there as I did yesterday. But I think the Sprite obscures the flavor of the whiskey just a little bit. Actually, quite a bit. So that's my thing with cocktails is I want to taste the whiskey. And with the highball yesterday, with just the soda water, I could taste the whiskey all the way through to the end of the glass. But with the Sprite, it's there, but it's muted. This is worth drinking, though. This is still pretty good, very refreshing. But I really think I liked it better with the Topo Chico. Well, my recommendation. I am just a Scotch noob. I'm doing the study to find out what I like and why I like it. I've been studying bourbons and rye, American whiskeys, and Texas whiskeys for several years, so I'm now branching off into the world of Scotch. I started about 5 years ago, just dabbling here and there a little bit with Scotch, but I've never really studied it before. So now I'm doing an intense study. And I can now officially recommend Dewars White Label strongly, really. I think it's a good whiskey for easy sipping and simple cocktails for us Scotch beginners. I get it that if you've been in the Scotch world for a long time and you're all about single malts, yeah, you're not going to really pay much attention to the blends, but I really think the science of blends, the complexity of blends is an important thing. So if you want a quick, easy intro to Scotch, here you go. Dewars White Label. Absolutely. At about 21 bucks a bottle, this is a great value. And so I would really recommend this. I can see why this is number 2 seller or number 6 seller, whatever it is. It's pretty high up on the list. So for those of you just beginning to step over from American whiskeys into the Scotch world, Dewars White might be a good starting point. When this bottle is empty, will I purchase another? Absolutely. All right, next on Blended Scotch Reviews, Isle of Skye 8. It's a lesser known Scotch that has a lot more peat smoke to it, I think. Well, this does it now for Blended Scotch Reviews and Stab the Dragon. Out here.